Okay, people, I'm back. Back again with this horrendous little notebook. It fights me. Okay, what is it? What is it this week? This week is Godzilla, King of Monsters. It's a different choice in a couple of ways. First, it's an audiobook. I think I've done one other audiobook here. I haven't read as many audiobooks, so it's a different experience. It's also a novelization of a movie, right? Which I haven't done a novelization yet. I haven't read many novelizations, to be honest. I think kind of the Star Trek one I did was inadvertently a novelization, but I don't think it said it was a novelization. In any case, this is the first one I went in knowing it was a novelization. I always wanted to read one. And then we have this the Audible subscription thing, right? So you get certain books that you can read without buying them. So this is one of them, like, and maybe that's why they don't make more novelizations because I wasn't about to buy it, but then I tried it and I kind of like it. It's okay. So I do like Godzilla. I mean, it's just fun, a big monster. And I did watch this movie, and so novelization comes, and I already want to read a novelization, so I give it a whirl. What's my rating? Mm, mm, I it's weird. I want to say like a 4 out of 5, but I think it's my Godzilla bias, so I'm gonna say for safety's sake a 3. It's a 3 out of 5 book. Um, Clearly, if you like Godzilla, you will like this. If you just have a massive aversion to the idea, to the stories, then avoid it. But I think if you've seen a Godzilla movie and maybe kind of didn't like it, you might actually like this book more, if that makes any sense. So 3 out of 5. Yeah. What was I gonna say about this book? Rating. All right, let's just get into it. It is an Audible. Now, I wonder if that helped because that's more like a movie, right? Where you're not actively reading it yourself. In any case, the narration itself, the person reading, does a spectacular job. You can't. You can write cinematically. You can show me cinematics, but you can also verbalize it. Some narrators are just plain. They just go very monotone. I don't think it would have worked for this book as well. It might have detracted. But he has a good rise and a good fall. And he adds some intensity the way the movie did with, I'd say, the cinematography, right? When it gets dark and moody. He gives it dark and moody for you. He also gives a kind of a voice for each character, right? He's a male narrator, but he'll do like a feminine voice and then like a kid girl voice and then like a dad voice. So he does all the characters, but he didn't go overboard in any one of them. And yet he's still like he sounds a lot like the actors in the movie. It's very subtle. It's very good. I haven't heard anyone else do quite this well. Because you're not, right? You don't just get to make up your own voice. You could. I think he could have. But the fact that he could sort of match something about the actors is pretty incredible. All right, well, so the end of the story itself, then. The book is able to because we got to consider it like a 10-hour version of the movie, right? The movie got 2 hours maybe, so you give it 8 more hours. How much more could you get? And you might think that's too much, right? Who wants to sit through that long of a movie? But when you read it in book form, it doesn't feel that long at all. It actually feels about as long as the movie felt. Because I'll get a couple examples here, but it's like you get more time spent with the aftermath of a Godzilla showing up in San Francisco or Hawaii, wherever he showed up in the first one, and destroying things. People popped out their cell phones. They were freaked the crap out. He was on the news. The world has to adjust, right? And one of the things it says is no one wants seafront property anymore. I mean, that's just kind of funny. All this time, that's some of the most expensive property you can get. Now, sell it for cheap because a monster could come out of the ocean and squish you. Uh, we start with Emma, and I'm like, it's like a weird rule in writing where the first character you meet is like the main character. So Emma's sort of our mom. Emma's the mom, sort of our main character. Then we get her daughter Maddie, and we get and this is the fun of the book. We get very interpersonal things with them, inner monologues, inner turmoils. There's some issue between mom and dad, so obviously the daughter's feeling that effect of, like a kid, sitting through a divorce that's about to happen. It gets all kind of convoluted inside. But we can get that convolution without having to slow the momentum of the story. Where I don't think you could put that into a big budget Godzilla movie, right? You only have so much time, and something's got to get smashed at some point. So it's one of the benefits of making it in writing form. And the same goes for sort of their motivations. Dad's studying wolves. Maddie loves animals, and I think mom is some kind of what did it say? Where did I write it down? I just can't find it now. Yes, this is why you write notes so you can't find stuff in them. Smart. Paleobiologist. That's what she is. I like that goes from like niche to in vogue, right? Because 2 minutes ago we didn't care about dinosaurs, but now they're walking around. So bring me that. You're an expert. You're the closest we got. I like that. We also we introduce the orca. It's some kind of device that the mom Emma is working on. But we introduce it like right around some deep inner conversation between sort of mother and daughter. And the author does this a lot throughout the book as well, where we're going to have this sort of large element we're dealing with, right? They are monsters in the world. They're titans. What they call them? Titans. Godzilla's real. So how can I get my reader to go with me on that? Every book gets a little bit of latitude. If I get a romance book or a space book, I'm aware we're gonna go to space. I don't need to know, you know, every inner workings of the spaceship. But you're gonna bump up against a wall at some point. I'm not just gonna give you free reign. Otherwise, I'm like, that's magic, right? A romance, you're like somebody's being aggressive. I'm not instantly gonna think that person's gonna murder me. It's not a murder book. It's a romance book, right? So the readers will give you some latitude. So the author has some latitude. There's Godzilla on the cover. But even in that, you have to ground your book in some way. And he chooses these very realistic moments you could have in your life, right? Where in short words they're discussing talking to dad, the father. But between each word bouncing back, you feel this full back monologue in their minds as to what you would do, right? You're like, I shouldn't keep my daughter from this. He has a right. This is wrong. And then you start half thinking of all the reasons why you might have been separated to begin with and the fight that's going to come. And the daughter on her part is thinking, maybe I shouldn't ask to reunite. It'll make mom mad. It'll make all this drama. But shouldn't I leave him alone? You have all these full thoughts in your mind, but what you say is, yeah, or no, or I'm all right, or let's just eat. These kind of placating things. Well, the book can get all that, mush it together, and then the reader just absorbs it in a very real way. That's a realistic conversation people have. And so you feel grounded and attached, and then you just accept this machine can talk to the animals, right? This kind of thing. He does this throughout. A real thing, there's the crazy. A real thing, this crazy. And it works really well. It really does. And like I said, in a lot of ways, it might be better than the movie because the movie doesn't have time. The actor just has to show it. They got good actors, but you only got so much screen time. Um, they we go into a good description of a jungle, right? We're in some kind of site. Emma's at some kind of a site, and they call it the Temple of the Moth, right? So if you didn't know, it's just sort of fantastical. But if you do know, you give it that like what is it, that DiCaprio meme, right? It's like, oh, it's Mothra, right? And you sort of spaz out a little bit. And it's sort of the same in the movie as in the book, right? Because of the slow build, then you get that excitement. But I think even without the pre-knowledge, you'll get without the pre-knowledge where the excitement will hit you, you'll just get the wonder of what's happening. And that's another thing I like in the book that I wish could have been done more in the movie. We spend a lot of time and go to a lot of places to give the reader a sense of wonder, a sense of myths coming alive, right? Every myth has some kind of story about a dragon or some mythical creature that, came from the heavens, this kind of thing. Well, before Godzilla, like in lore, those are just stories. And after Godzilla, you start looking at those stories like, well, they're describing a large monster. Maybe I want to go see if I can find it, right? And you have scientists from these different places coming to grips with that, right? Like, that was a story my grandmother told. And then I'm looking at this thing. I love that element in this book. It expands, right? It gives you more of what you want, which is these monsters. Of course, we also get Congress. They got to stick their nose in everything. We get the military who just wants them dead, but I'm like, I'm not sure how you think you'd kill them because they dropped a nuke on Godzilla and that didn't kill him. So I'm like, I'm not sure. I think at this point, I think at this congressional point, they think they've nuked Godzilla and he's dead, but of course he's not. You don't kill Godzilla. You can't kill Big Daddy G. Side note, it's another benefit I think of the book, right? Because in the movie you have a visualization of Godzilla. This is what he looks like. Now, for this particular movie, I wasn't the biggest fan of this Godzilla. I think he got a little too much junk in the trunk, right? Boy, thick. My all-time favorite is Godzilla 2000. Go watch that movie. It's hilarious. He is who I call Big Daddy G. So when I can read this book and just imagine that Godzilla, then this movie's a lot better. If you get what I'm saying. Uh, they describe some kind of a snake monster, and then they're like, maybe that's why such and such old civilization's gone. And I like that idea too, where we're bringing in sort of the historical. Why did these ancient race who had all these big pyramids just go away? No, I mean, if the big monster came and ate everybody, fun. All right. In the movie, Mark, the dad, they bring him in to help find Godzilla. And in the movie, he's like short with everybody, right? On the one hand, you let it go, the actor does a good job. But on the other hand, you're like, bro, calm down a little bit. Why are you so got to stick up your butt, right? But the book is able to give you that inner dialogue of him. What is it? Monsters are real. I have an issue with my wife. My wife and kids may have been kidnapped, and now I got to come back in and deal with these sort of monsters. And you end up finding out later that I think Godzilla, his kid dies in like a Godzilla attack. So we have a lot of emotions swirling around. And of course, if you get emotional, that you don't, most people don't just start crying in public. You snap at people. You're mad. That sad emotion, these conflicted states always come out as mad. They have, of course, they have some kind of oil rig, deep sea, underwater base that they fly into because that's less efficient. And I'm like, normally those sort of things would annoy me, but they just don't in this book. Again, I've signed up for Godzilla. There's already a giant monster. I'm going to give you a lot of leeway. And an ocean base is cool. So you can go ahead and put it in. Don't bother me. I always like a oil rig ocean base. It's always fun. But they did it in Call of Duty one time. I think they've done it in countless movies. Uh, Morbius. Morbius did it. It works every time. Well, no, Morbius was on a boat. Scratch Morbius. They have, um, oh yeah. At one point, at one point, Mark, because they're like, well, here's the base, and here's where we keep this, and here's where we keep these monsters, and here's where we're studying that, right? So the reader wants to move around in this space, but how does the writer get me around without being just here's a vomiting of list of things and places? So what they do is I'm going to take Dad around. I'm going to take Mark around this place, and he's sort of the vehicle for the reader. At some point, though, Mark flat stops. He just stops and is like, I don't care about any of this, and just leaves. Right? And I'm like, one, it's a great way to get me around the base. I want to see this stuff. But two, it's a better way to connect me with Mark, on top of getting me out of the sort of tour. Because if your daughter and your wife are kidnapped by some kind of terrorist and Godzilla's around, at some point you're going to be polite, but at some point you just like, bro, and you're not in a mental state to be nice about that. So you just cut that crap off. You're like, bro, shut. I don't care about this crap. Very realistic again. The terrorist. Guy's named Jonah, some British guy, because British people make the best villains. Everyone knows this. He gives him a good accent in the book too. In any case, Jonah is an eco-terrorist, right? And I just like this idea. One, it is sort of realistic. Who would want to do this in the world? These Greenpeace sort of loving environmentalist people. And then it sort of got me thinking, like, how do these environmentalists act that making one a terrorist who would kill lots of people is completely believable in a story, right? It sort of says something about how ye old environmentalists act, how PETA and these people act. Uh, then the hype. Okay, so they start to build the hype on a particular monster. And we'll cut back and forth. But the hype starts with there's some kind of mysterious creature in ice. And when the mercenaries get a look at it, they sort of like back up. So hardened mercenary murderers kind of terrified of this monster. And I'm like, I'm interested. Cut away. I'm like, yeah, savor it. Um, we have Godzilla like make his presence known. He shows up to their underwater base because I don't know why you had an underwater base. It's silly. But Godzilla shows up to it, flexes on it, and they of course have to back down. And Mark's using his like experience with wolves and alpha predators to know how to react. You be submissive so they don't try and kill you. And I like that we show Godzilla this way, and they show a lot of the Titans this way. And it isn't a large monster. It is a large monster, but it's smart, and we're not really sure the extent of that intelligence, right? So if you have a gun at him, he's like looking at you like, "I'll f you up," but he never says it. But then you're like a tiny ant to him, right? If an ant pointed an ant gun at you, would you say anything? Maybe not. But then you were like, you think you're better than me, and you smash it, right? It's one of these type of things. But I love that we don't come out and say how smart these creatures are, but that they are highly intelligent. It makes for a scarier experience, a more interesting experience. But then at the same time, in that same little scene, we get Mark. He gets this again a feeling, which is you can't do in a movie as well. A feeling, some connection with Godzilla in this moment, where this is the thing that killed his son, right? If it hadn't attacked the city, his son would be alive. So he hates it. But then he also gets the sense that this creature is going to bring him back into contact with his wife and his daughter, right? Which is all that he really cares about. And in olden books, in fantasy books, in historical type story fables, there's always not just a monster, not just a dragon, but an interaction between these creatures and our hero or a maiden or something to this effect. And sort of in the myth they talk, but it gives me that feeling of those old mythical stories when I'm reading this one, and it just sort of feeds this story and it propels it along. I really do enjoy that. Add to that, we keep using notes, notes from some famous scientist, and he'll be giving you some description of some mythological creature. And it really, oh my, here's Godzilla's world, the world building of Godzilla. It really expands the world out. It lets you walk around in the world more than a 2-hour movie. It's a lot of fun. Stanton brings up the Hollow Earth theory because you can add, I mean, once monsters are real, why not some conspiracy theories? Why not some kooky out there theories? Which the Hollow Earth theory is, I want to say like an actual scientist thought of this, but like in the 1700s, I'm not sure on that. But it's, the Earth's crust is like this thick, and we live on like that much of it. So there's space for stuff underneath. And the Hollow Earth theory being that there's not a molten core, but just like this inner other planet inside our planet where dinosaurs still live, or who knows what else lives under there. Like, I don't know all the extent, but people bring it up a lot in conspiracy theory stuff. And I like that it just makes an appearance here. It's just fun. Because again, I'm eating popcorn. I'm listening to this great popcorn book. Throw me Hollow Earth. Throw me some craziness. I'm here for it. But then right after that, we have our main leader, Sarazawa. And he is really feeling the weight. And again, the crazy theory, and then back to some realistic. Sarazawa's nervous that, something might happen to Mark because he's friends with Mark, the wife, and of course, who wants to see a kid die? So, on top of all the other issues of running this monarch who's trying to deal with these monsters in the world, he's dealing with these colleagues and their issues and not wanting to make them worse. Um, so you eco-terrorists decide to wake up what we end up calling Monster Zero. That's the one in the ice. That seems smart. And we end up with this great dramatic rescue while the ice is breaking and this monster's coming alive. It's really great. So, drama, and then you add to the drama. Turns out your wife's a traitor, right? So when we thought she was held hostage, turns out she's just working with the enemy. And this is a great dramatic moment. Works. It works in the book. It works in the movie. I don't have any problems here. Now, what does work better here is in the movie you see, and I never know why, right? They're like, here's a giant monster. It's 300 feet tall or whatever. It's huge. Let me shoot it, bro. Do you know how freaking big an elephant gun is? Because an elephant's big. You have to have this huge bullet, this massive hand cannon of a gun to maybe, and you better not aim for the head because it might bounce off or some mess like this. Elephants are huge. This thing's way, 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 way bigger than an elephant. What is your pea shooter going to do? Right? That's what I always think when I watch the movie. Like, why are you shooting it? But in the book, right, the dad goes back for these soldiers, so they like him. There's heroism there. But then they see this monster coming alive. The ice of Antarctica is breaking all around them. And they're like, the soldiers sort of, you see the inner thought going, none of us are going to make it anyway, probably. One, I might as well go down swinging. And two, maybe if I hold him off, Dad can get away and save his daughter. Right? I am a soldier. This kind of thinking. Right? But the idea that he's like, well, none of us make it anyway, makes them hold, their final stand make more sense. They're sitting there shooting at this big three-headed monster. It, of course, vaporizes them, but it does give the other guys enough time to get away. But then it explains that silliness from the movie in a realistic way. Benefit, what does it point go to? Novelization here. We then get Emma calling in to Monarch, and she's going to give her Thanos speech, because that's her plan, actually. Their kid dies and makes her rethink her whole life. And what the conclusion she comes to is people are horrible. She's like, human beings are a cancer on Earth, and the Earth's cure, their white blood cells, are Godzilla and these monsters. And so if they come and, kill 80% of the Earth's population or whatever, then it'll just be a good thing. And that her proof of this is, like wherever they show up, they like emit radiation, and then that radiation spurs this great growth in the middle of a city, right? And so I'm like, that's some like Thanos level eco-terrorist crap. To be like, well, if I could nuke New York, kill a bunch of people, get rid of that CO2, and then replace it by like a rainforest, I think that'd be a net gain for Earth. And I'm like, y'all are kind of nuts. Calm down with that mess. But that's her theory. Big shocking all theory. Damn. Upside down. Um, we get. I'll just like this element. They say Monster Zero, wherever he flies, is like a hurricane, and when he lands somewhere, he just sits in the middle of a. They say a Category 6 hurricane, and I'm like, the hype building on Monster Zero is just tremendous. We all know what's going to happen in the end. Godzilla's going to fight Monster Zero, but the hype, the fight hype, is just to a T in this book. We did do something the movie cannot do or does not. Oh man, I skipped a page when I was writing my notes. I can't use those now. We do something the movie can't do. It doesn't have the time, but it's what I wanted the movie to do, right? So things are coming to a boil, and then we take like a whole chapter out, basically. Because what he'll do in a chapter is here's a chapter, and then stuff happens. Like we go to Mark, then we go to Emma, then we might go to some other place, right? So we'll have these various locations with no real break, and then cut to another chapter. So in this one whole chapter, we're not surprised when we go to multiple different locations. And the different locations he takes us to is each a different monster. What is it? Titanus Methuselah in Berlin, and we cut right to people on a date in Germany, and they're pointing at a mountain, saying, I've been to that mountain a bunch, and then like the mountain starts moving, and the dude freaks out and runs, and the lady just chills there. It's kind of funny. The scene's funny, but then it gives us the idea that these monsters could have been like your just around, just sleeping, dormant. A monster there for 400 years. I mean, a mountain for 400 years, right? Or a hill, or just under the ocean, just chilling in a volcano, not doing anything, right? That they're all around us this whole time. We get a kraken in the Indian Ocean. It's like a chameleon, but instead of just changing its skin, it can change its radar signature and make its heart stop and appear dead, and all this kind of trickery. We get Behemoth in Brazil. I believe in Brazil, one of the monarch scientists is like listening to Emma's speech, and is like, "I'm with her. We need to help these monsters and kill humanity." So she turns traitor mid. So even these little vignettes have this rise and fall and dramatic. We get Kong Island. I mean Skull Island with Kong, and it's just now from the perspective solely of one of the Titans. His inner monologue is what he thinks happening. This weird call I'm hearing. These other little things I'm gonna have to beat up coming out. But what it ends up doing is it makes it feel global, right? It makes it feel this worldwide issue that's happening that you're just right in the middle of. And I'm like, you want that when it says King of Monsters in the movie. You want him to fight like 10 monsters or whatever, just this crazy thing. But again, you can't follow that many monsters in a movie. You only have so much time. But in the book, each gets a vignette. Some of the people die, some of the people live, some don't have any people at all. It's just this whole big sphere of a thing. It's wonderful. Turns out, again, they build the hype on Monster Zero so well. Turns out his name is Ghidorah, and they would do just pepper it in, right? Like they make it seem like no one even wanted to write him down in history books, like it might call him back into existence or something. Like it was this whole Earth trouble that happened because of Ghidorah showing up, and they're saying he's from space, so he's not part of the natural order, and that he might reshape the whole planet to make it in his image. I'm like, it goes really deep. They end up using a weapon that sucks all the oxygen out of a space, to try and kill Godzilla. Right? Obviously, it's not going to kill Big Daddy G. But it does hurt him, so he has to go and recuperate. And they're like, his recuperation could take decades. They don't have decades because Ghidorah's over there using these big monsters to terraform the planet, right? They're making volcanoes erupt, causing earthquakes. The planet won't look the same in a minute. So they're like, I need a nuke. We're going to go into the Hollow Earth and nuke Godzilla because that'll rejuvenate him. I'm like, yes, yes, this is what we need to do. I'm all for it. It fits. It's like it fits this story to a T, right? You want big explosions. You want craziness to happen. In it, of course, something happens to the timer. It can't function down there. There's too much radiation. So your boy Sarazawa has to sacrifice himself and manually set off this bomb. And it does. It is like a bit of a heartstring moment because you're like, I don't want this guy to die. But, can't help it. Maddie ends up going to Fenway Park. And I'm like, this is a perfect setting for a massive Godzilla versus Ghidorah fight, which of course we're going to get in the end. We know this. It doesn't disappoint. And then we end up with because this whole time, like I said, we've been having stupid notebook. We've been having these quotes from these famous people, or what should feel like famous people, right? From the notes of so and so, and from the quotes of so and so. Every chapter starts like this. Again, adds a realism. And in the end, we end up, the last one we get is from the notes of Sarazawa, which then, like, is a great way to button end the whole sort of story. Whoops. Because now it's like, again, I didn't go back and read which one of these quotes was from a real scientist or what if it's real lore or not. That's not the point of the book. The point is that it felt real, and that now we're putting our Sarazawa in that lineage of real scientists. And in a sense, you're like, well, he gets to live on because of his research. So it's like a perfect tribute to this character, right? That he becomes a scientist in the pantheon, and that his knowledge will help us in the future world in dealing with these titans. It's a great way to send off the character. Of course, we end with a big fight, and then, like, I believe Emma ends up dying, the wife. But I'm like, bro, you did set off a chain of events that killed, like, a good chunk of people. So there's no redemption other than dying. Hero arc. But the guy gets away, Mark gets away with Maddie. Happily ever after, right? I like this book. I like how much it builds on this world. I like being in this world. I like Big Daddy G. I like these monsters fighting. I like the foreshadowing, right? Because when this movie came out, and you're like, bro, we have to have Godzilla versus King Kong, right? We just got to have that. And we end up getting that movie. It was fun, too. It's not a movie vlog, but it is a novelization. But then I'm like, I finished this, and it got me thinking, like, why don't I have more novelizations, right? It really does. They're fun. They're fun, and they let you live in these worlds a lot longer, right? So I'm going to try out more novelizations if I can do it. All right. Ad time. I want to thank everyone for being here, for listening to for listening to these vlogs, if I can talk. Let me cover one book again in this ad. This is this story's about dwarves and elves and orcs, kind of, right? So if you like that sort of thing, it's not heavy. This is the book for you, right? Go check this out. I think you'll like it. No, it's not better than Lord of the Rings, but, is any book really? But it might be funner. All right. All right, people. Thank you for tuning in. I will see all of you next week.